And that level is what we're going to discuss further in this psukim. This Mamer we're learning now, which is the hemshech to the Mamer before. This is the 30th Mamer. He's continuing to explain the pasuk like we said before, all the avodah, the sarusa de latato, the isha that gets from the level of ish, and now he's going to talk about the earlier isarusa de leila, which is a higher isarusa de leila, to get the person to do the isarusa de latato, as we'll see inside. Let's look inside. The Maimon start nimshach ledrush de leil. Ani Hashem Elokeichem asher etzeisi eschem eretz Mitzrayim. So this is the follow-up. This is the end of the previous psukim that we explained. So he says Pirush. So what is the meaning? So he's going to explain this. The Hinei Omer Azal be'inyan kiddushim to you. We have a very strange sort of statement of our sages. The pasuk says, "Kiddushim to you, you should be kiddushim." The Eibishter tells us, "Kiddushim to you, Lashem Elokeichem." So the Medrash says, "Yochel kamoni." Maybe you would think that you should be as holy as I am. So the Eibishter says, "Ki kodesh ani Hashem Elokeichem." No. Kodesh ani, which means kiddushasi lemayla mikidushaschem. My sanctity, my holiness is higher than you. Kedoshim to you, you have to be holy. But kiddushasi lemayla is higher than kiddushas. It's a little bit schwer to understand. We have to tell you that the Eibishter's kedusha, holiness, is greater than our kedusha. So why do we need to say that? The pashtem pshat is kedoshim to you because I'm holy, you should be holy. But the Medrash says, you should be holy, but don't think that you can be as holy as I am. I am holier than you. What kind of a thought is it that your holiness is, I'm a greater holiness than that? So, the way he's going to explain that the holiness that comes from Hashem on his own is higher than your holiness that you can bring down. There is a Sarusa de Tato that brings down the Sarusa de La'ela. But the Sarusa de La'ela that comes before, which is higher, comes from higher place. But Pirush Bazahu, what is the meaning in this? Hine yesh isarusa de La'ela. There is one level of a Sarusa de La'ela, which means, so al yidei isarusa de Latato, isarusa de La'ela. Through the Sarusa de Latato, you get the Sarusa de La'ela. V'zeu inyan, that's the word v'yisam kiddushim. That means you should be holy. What does it mean? Through there, it says specifically, you make it your God, that through the Sarusa de Letato, you bring down the Sarusa de Leila. Gimel Pomim Kodesh. That's the level of 3 times Kodesh. Cool. Okay, so that's in the Sarusa de Leila. That comes after the Sarusa de Letato. That the Yid is Mamshich, the Sarusa de Leila of Gimel Pomim Kodesh. Gimel Pomim Kodesh, Kodesh, and Tzvaka is to bring down the Eibishter into the world. Okay, yes, Sarusa de Leila, Koidem is Sarusa de Letato. There is an Sarusa Leila before the Sarusa Letato, and that is Lahalo is Mimat Lemaila. That is Sarusa Leila is to bring up from below to above. The Sarusa de Leila Zu. This is Sarusa Leila. Godlo Ma'loso Ma'oid Ma'oiso Shaidei Sarusa de Letato. This is much greater. The place where this is Sarusa Leila comes from is much greater than the Isarusa Leila that comes through the Isarusa de Letato. This is in a greater place. She'ein Isarusa de Letato yechayla lagi eleho. The Isarusa de Letato cannot reach that level. So when the Sarusa de Latata brings the Sarusa de Leila, that means the Sarusa de Latata has a connection. It can bring down the Sarusa de Leila. But if it's a Sarusa de Leila that comes without the Sarusa de Latata, that means it comes from a higher place, that the Sarusa de Latata cannot reach the Bechla. Rabbi Shem Tov says, the statement of Shem Tov, there is a baskel that announces. We learn in the Pirkei Avos, we learn in other places, a baskel comes out and announces. What's this baskel? What is this? So he says, Shahim Hirhure Tshuva. Those are thoughts of Tshuva. A person all of a sudden feels that he wants to do Tshuva. Where does it come from? It's not the Sarusa de Latata. He was in the middle of doing something else. All of a sudden, he has an inspiration that he wants to do Tshuva. That comes from that baskel that came in. They come from above. The person does nothing on its own. It was like in the beginning of creation. Even though after the world of creation was created, we say that all the hamshachas that come down have to come from Sarusa de Latata. But in the beginning, when Hashem created everything, it came ki chafetz chesed. It came because Hashem wants kindness, so it came from Hashem without the Sarusa de Latata. It came from Sarusa de Leila alone. And that's what the Huru Tshuva, that's where it comes from. That's the Sarusa de Leila comes from itself. And about this Hamshoch, our sages tell us, Kedushosi is l'mayla mikedushaschem. My sanctity, meaning the sanctity that comes down on its own, is greater than the Kedusha that comes down through your Avodah. The Im Kipshutei ain't a moving cloud, because if we should just simply understand, do we need to say this, that Hashem's Kedusha is greater? I mean, that's obvious, but we're trying to say that the Kedusha that comes with Sarusa de Leila from Sarusa de Latata is not as great as the Kedusha that comes Milmala Tzimtzot. And that Hamshocha that proceeds says, Ani Hashem Chulu Asher Hitzesich Eschem Eretz Mitzrayim. I, Hashem, take you out of Eretz Mitzrayim, which means Hashem is the one that takes you out. Shani Hitzesi Liis Sarusa de Latata. I brought about this Sarusa de Latata. That was the Yehuda Tshuva that you had to turn to Hashem. Comes from Hashem, from the Sarusa de Leila. And then he say again, Ani Hashem Eleikechem is Sarusa de Leila alidei Sarusa de Latata. That through the Sarusa de Latata, through the Sarusa de Latata, Koire Batoira. That means, like you say, you read in the Torah, you call in the Torah, you bring down. Shemamshich. What do you mean? The expression Koire Batoira. Koire Batoira means you read in the Torah. Koire. Bal Koire. Koire is the Torah. But Koire Batoira means you're calling in the Torah, which means you're calling down the Ein Sof through the Sarusa de Latata. You're mamshich the Ein Sof, the Koyach, into the Torah from Chochmah and Kesef. Shemamshich Gilu Ein Sof ba'Torah. He brings down Ein Sof in the Torah, which is really all the time that we're doing is we're bringing down the mitzvahs. This is talking about Torah, but the mitzvahs. We always say the idea is to bring down a union. L'shem yichud kuchabrichu shchinta. You know, in Chabad we only do it by Baruch Shamar, but by the Welt, in the other sidders they do it all the time. Chabad is one time, but it goes for all the day. All the mitzvahs we do is to connect kuchabrichu shchinta. Kuchabrichu is the level of Zoh, of Atzilus, and shchinta is the level of Malchus. To bring down the Zoh into Malchus, which means to bring down the Hamshachas, and Zoh is connected to above to bring it down into Biyah. That's what all the mitzvahs. Derech Klal Kol HaMitzvahs Heim L'Shem Yichud Kuchav Richu Shchinta. They are for the purpose. Kutsho bericho is zo ma'ilum esein sof. Zeir ampin is from the olam esein sof. Ushchinte is malchus hamekanenes b'biyah, that ness in biyah sheirish shemokah neshamas Yisrael, which is the root of the neshamas Yisrael, from malchus that come into biyah. B'hinei biyah heim olam es nefrodim. Biyah are worlds that are separate. The einim agia sham hayichud elyon, over there the supreme yichud, the yichud that is in Atzilus, the bittul b'metzias, the doesn't reach there. Raka yichud u'b'chinas malchus. It's only in the level of malchus. Hainu b'chinas bittul sheyei bot la yesh chulu. So bittul that the yesh should be bot. Dalet. So this is an important part to remember, that the idea is that you have to bring down this bittul l'mayla. And this is also going to explain the whole idea with Korach, with the talus over there, because here we're talking about the Parshas Tzitzis, but we know that Korach used the Tzitzis as part of his machloikis. Korach went and he said, one of the arguments against Moshe Rabbeinu was, if you have a talus which is made out of tchelas, do you still need tzitzis in that talus? And Moshe Rabbeinu told him yes, so he started making fun. He was challenging Moshe Rabbeinu. So what's the idea? The tzitzis is the amshocha of Avav Yira, lamata in a pnimius. The talus is the makif. He wanted the makif. He wanted the seivuk. He didn't want to bring it down into the pnimius. But here we're learning the man tiskiru, that to make it down has to be the tzitzis, has to be the Avav Yira, has to bring it down in a pnimius, so that in the avodas Hashem should be the level of the tzitzis. You can't just have the level of the talus. And he wanted to use this also. He doesn't, the other Mamorim as saying, we just don't need to have Moshe and Aaron, as explained in the other Mamorim. Let's see inside. Hine, Mizeh Yuvon Gamkein, Inyan Mamer Azal, we can also understand the saying of our sages, Aposik Vayikach Korach. So there it says that Talis Shakula Tcheles Chayeves Betzitzis Oy Peturachulu. So he says Korach took a Talis which is all made out of the Tcheles, and he asked, challenged Moshe Rabbeinu, is it obligated tzitzis or is it exempt? So this idea is explained later on, and when explaining the portion of Ikach Korach, the Titus Korach Hoyo, what was Korach's argument? That the talis the talis is the surrounding light atzmai, but the strand of the tzitzis, they're only a contracted, small extension. They're in the level of sidus, which is no comparison. There's no relation, no value next to the makif itself. How is it possible? The tal is the makif itself. Then there's no mitzvah. Only to the strength. So it's explained over there. He intended, really, he wanted to use this as a reason for his argument against Aaron's kuhuna. But the truth is that he's wrong. The main mitzvah is through the tcheles trap. The reason is because through that comes down in the person in a inner way. That comes to the person through the tcheles. In other words, you can learn Torah, you can do mitzvahs, but you can miss the whole point. If you don't do it with Avas Hashem and Yiras Hashem, so then it's called Mishemer Enli Torah afilu Torah in lo. If he just wants to learn Torah, but he doesn't want to bring it down into the level of Avodah Yerushalayim, he doesn't even have Torah. So that was the idea of the tchelas, of the talis, or the tzitzis. But Pimashakosu can be in the tchelas, based on what we explained here, as far as the strand of the tchelas, Yuval Zebetoisis Bir. We can understand it with more explanation. And that is Kihine Mevuer Lamaila Shat Chelas Ubchinas Moichin de Abba. That's the Moichin of Chochma, because the oil that comes, but it burns, it's the Gevuris of Chochma. Shu Lahamshich Bchinas Abit Lamata B'Malchus. That is to draw down, to extend the level of Bittel. Chochma experiences Bittel. Koyach Ma. Chochma intimate. It's Bittel. To bring down from Chochma the level of Bittel into Malchus. Kidei, for the purpose, Liyesh Bitla Yesh. To be the Bittel of the Yesh, which is Nohira Tichla. That's the light of the Tichla, which is on the bottom by the wick. That's the idea of the Tchelis. Achshat Tchelis umebchinas Gevuris d'Abba. Tchelis comes from the strength of Abba, not just why? Because you need the Gevuris d'Abba. Shemehem davke nimshach koyach v'amshoch zu liyis bit layesh. Because in order to that koyach and this amshoch to be the bit layesh, it has to come with Gevura, because you got to be mevat layesh of you. The reason is in order to descend, to bring down, and to draw down, like that it should reach also the place of the yesh, that comes through that from the flow of the Gevura, it comes down in an inner gamke. Like for example, Hamshochas Hachayis Behoever, like the life force of the Aver comes with the level of Gevura. That's why the blood is red. Red represents Gevura. Like the dam is the soul, because that's the Gevura that comes to energize the body, to give life to the body. That just becomes in a surrounding way, a makif. Like the pasuk says, his right hand, which is chesed, that hugs me. That's in his makivdik way. I guess the smoiler, the beginning, tachas l'roishi, the level of gevura, that comes down in the primis. That's the chayis. So what do we want from the level of chokhmah? We wanted to bring a bittel hayesh. It should be in a primis. In the yesh, there should be a primis in the bittel. That's why we need the teichel, the tchelas. That's why we need gevuras. That's the gevuras of chokhmah. Lachein, kidei lagia bittel v'mokim hayesh. In order for the bittel to reach in the place where there's the yesh, shuam shocha b'chinas pnimis gamkein. This is also an inner hamshocha. Sheyiga habittel b'toichei Mamer, so that this bittel should touch inside, actually, mekerev ish v'leiv omik, from the inside of the person, very deep in his heart. Zeu alidei b'chinas gevuris da Abba daike. You need that's the gevuris of Abba to bring down an ashpah. Shashar, where does this come from? The chokhmah stimoah. It comes in the level of chokhmah stimoah. That's the level of keser shaboy melubash gevura da'atik. The gevura da'atik is dressed up in the chokhmah stimoah, and that's the shoydish of the chokhmah of atzilus, in which there is the gevura of chokhmah atzilus, the level of tchelos. Kamashikos v'ramaz v'shparshas pincha posik shma b'ni musar avicha. From there comes the source, the power to sort out, which is to the negate, to subjugate the yesh. Since that's the purpose of the tchelas, what we want is that it should become in an inner way. We need to become to the strand of tchelas. It's a chut, it's a string of tchelas. The talus of tchelas isn't going to do it, because the talus of tchelas remains in a level of makif. You want it to be a cider, you want it to touch, you want it to come down b'pnimis, it needs to be a chut to tchelas. Sha'idei shu b'chinas chut, through being a level of chut, nimshach b'chinas pnimi mamash, it extends to be an pnimi mamash. Valderech zeh, we talked about before, u'inyan hakoitzi deciding. We talked about the point of the hair of the arich ampin, hanim shochim arich ampin, the kav marich ampin. Mashenkin hatalas atzmei. But we talk about the talis itself. Although it's old tcheles, who are dying rag b'chinas makif, it's only a makif. So you can have tcheles there, but it's not pnimius. Lenoga habitla adayin b'pnimiusay ki ima dechutim chulu. The bittel does not touch the inside, only through the strands. The strands brings it inside. So Badir explains the ha'ores ava v'yira. That's the Mamer we learned before the previous Mamer. That the ha'ores ava v'yira. Sheheim b'chinas tcheles v'lovam shebetzitzis. That's the tcheles and lovam tzitzis. Hein hanikra Torah Sa'odom. That's called the Torah Sa'odom. It becomes Zois Torah Sa'odom because it becomes the person. Because that's your Ava, Dutzira, that's a Pnimius. Vatalis Shualavush Vamakiv Atzmei, the Torah Umitzvis Maisius, but the talis, which is the garment, the Makiv of Torah Mitzvah Maisius, that's called Mitzvah Hashem. Because it didn't come down to the person, that's Hashem's mitzvahs. If one says, no, I'm only going to learn Torah, which means I'm only going to have the talis, I'm only going to have, which is mitzvah Hashem. I'm going to do the Torah mitzvah Hashem. I feel the Torah, he doesn't even have that. Because you need, you have to have the strands, which you have to bring down the love and fear of Hashem in the Torah and the mitzvahs. When you bring it down the Ava V'yira, then you will remember the greatness of the Lavush. Yes, absolutely. The Lavush is the great, the Torah mitzvahs, higher level of Makiv. But how do you remember about the Lavush itself? You have to have the tzitzis, the Ava V'yira, to remind you about the Makiv. So this is also what our sages of blessed memory tell us. This is a Perek Beis the Shabbos. So over there, they say to him, a person after 120 years, you gotta face the Beis Din Shalamaylo, the heavenly court. So they ask you, did you set time for study Torah chulu? Then further it says, pilpalto bechachma chulu. Did you pilpul in wisdom? Basically discusses the love of Torah amongst other things. And then after the whole thing, we say like this: all the learning that you did, great. The Gemara says there, if fear of heaven is your storage, in other words, you have fear of heaven, so all the learning of the Torah and all the people, then you're in. In means yes, then you're okay. Eloi, but if you didn't do loi, then it doesn't. And the Gemara brings the example that it would be a parable to this. A person says to his agent, bring up this kur, a large amount of wheat up to the attic for preservation. So we have it for the rest of the year after they cut the grain. So he went and he did his job. He did what he told him to do. So then he says, did you mix in a kav? That's a small amount of chumtin. That's from the earth. That's the salty earth to preserve the chitim. Amalei lav. He said, no, I didn't. Amalei mutav shaloi elisa. You have been better off not bringing it up. What's the benefit to bring up all the chitim, all the thing in the attic to save them is going to rot away because you didn't bring the kav chumtim. And basically, this is a marshal for the Torah, that if you don't have the Yiras Hashem, you don't have the preservative of the Torah, so all the Torah that you're learning isn't going to last, isn't worth. So therefore, you might as well not even learn Torah. I mean, like we said, brings out in one of the letters. It's not only we're telling him, okay, you wasted it, but you should have not even brought it up. So Rebbe is going to explain many diyukim in this language over here. But inyan ki chita, the word chita, we say especially, chita is chov base, is the numerical value of chita is 22. That represents the 22 atfen de'eraisa, chov base atfen de'eraisa, 22 letters of Torah. That's also the connection with matan Torah with ksir chitim. That shvuos is when you cut the wheat. L'chein matan Torah b'shvuos. That's what matan Torah is on shvuos, which is bekorek ksir chitim, because chita is the 22 letters of the Torah. What is this kav chumtin? This so Pirush Rashi explains Eretz Melecha, salty earth. So the Rebbe is going to explain how melech conceptually now is a preservative of the Torah. That all the korbanos have to have melech. The Mavur B'Kisvei HaRizal, so it's explained in the writings of Harizal, Sha'amelech hu gimel gvuris memutokos. That melech are the three gvuris that have been sweetened, because I guess salt is bitter, but it's already tasted. It makes it taste. It's called the gimel gvuris memutokos. Umelech oisios lechem. And the word melach, salt, is the same letter as bread, as lechem. And also the gematria, the milk of Maslow. Basically, all these points, the level of gevura, and the fact that that's a level of melech and gevura, represents the idea of an chokhmah, the level of tcheles of chokhmah, of we said before, the gevuras of chokhmah, which everything in this batter. Where does melech come from? Where does salt? Megvur is the abba. Just like we said before, tcheles comes from Megvur is the abba. And then I was going to say it's not a stira. This can come from tcheles. A lot of different things can come from Megvur is the abba. I was explain. And that's why who maflit hadam v'apselis mabosar. You salt the meat before you eat it, right? You salt it to extract the blood. The blood and the leftovers from the meat, you have to extract it. Why is salt? Because ki b'chokhma is beriru. Because chokhma sorts it out. Since salt comes from gvuras of chokhma, it sorts out the meat. V'lochein tzorich la'arvei b'chitim shu ha'torah. And that's why you got to mix in the salt. You got to mix in chokhmah. You got to mix in the level of bittul. Into the Torah that you learn, you must bring in the level of the bittul. Just that we want, in other words, that from the gevuras, the abba should be nimshach into the yesh, should be bitla yesh. That's why we need to mix salt into the Torah. When you salt the Torah, what it really means your Torah becomes with the level of bittul, with the level of Ava V'yira, with the level of Yerushalayim. That is salting the Torah. The Kav Chumtin. Similar to what we said before, that in order to be the bittul hayesh, it has to come from Gvuras Da'aba. From there comes the koyach that there should be the level of bittul, also the level of yesh. And from there comes the level of yira. Level of bittul and level of yira. Did you mix in for me? Why didn't say just you mixed in a kav chumtin? Because if you mix in, then the Torah becomes li. You change the Torah around. You can learn the Torah, but if you don't have the chumtin, then it's not li. It's not mine. Irafto is li b'hem kav chumtin. The tevis li miyuta. El rotza loymar shayidei sheyiras Hashem oitzroi. Through Hashem's yiras oitzroi. Azay ha-Torah v'achitim em li. They're mine. V'nikro Torahs Hashem. They become the Torahs Hashem, or else it's not even the Torahs Hashem. One pasuk. Another pasuk says, Kili b'nei Yisrael. All showing that you make up the level of li. If you have Torah without Yira, just like if you have a kur chitim, it's very expensive. It's worth a lot. It doesn't. It's worthless without the kaf chumtin. So better you don't bring it up. If you have a talis with food without tzitzis, worthless. But what are we saying? We're saying tcheles is gvuras abba. Now we're saying that the salt is gvuras abba. Everything is gvuras abba. That's not a problem, because it could be many different madregas. For example, ein litmoya shat tcheles gvuras abba. Shekemoy kain hamelech shorish mishaman. Also, the melech is rooted in gvuras abba. Kikamo b'chinas umadregas yesh b'gvuras abba. There's many different levels in gvuras abba. Gives you an example. Say, for example, Tfilas Shal Yad Hu B'Malchus. We say that Shal Yad is Malchus. B'Chem Mizbeach HaChitzin. The Mizbeach HaChitzin is also Malchus. B'Harei HaMizbeach Eina Atzah. We don't have no Mizbeach. Mitzvah Nochus Tfilin Shal Yad Kayemes. So if there is no Mizbeach, which means there's no level of Malchus, how do we have Tfilin Shal Yad? There's many madregas, so we don't have the level of malchus as it manifests itself in the Mizbeach HaChitzin, but we have the level of malchus where it manifests itself in Tefillin Shayat. So we may be one thing of Gvuras Tcheles, and there may another be Gvuras of Melech. It's not a stira. Still, there is a connection between them because they're both come from the same source. That Hashem's covenant with him was made a covenant for eternity with the salt. With what Hashem formed the covenant with him was with salt. The level of melech is that it sorts out in the chokhmah. The chokhmah affects the bittul hayesh, or can now be in kaf chumtin, like we said before, with regards to that level of chumtin. Kach kuhunas arin. Likewise, this is arin's kuhuna. It's like the melech. Shezekan arin, the beard of arin, who amshochas habittul n'shamas Yisrael. Just like the tzitzis bring down, the beard is also the zokin, also brings down the level of bittul into the world. Over there, the brother. Melech bris Elokechem, ubemigdash melech sham. So, okay. So.